It was 12:03 a.m., deep into the overnight slot, when line 2 lit up. I picked up expecting a request. Instead, I heard my own voice, reading tonight's playlist, word for word, seconds before I said it. I checked the caller ID. The line had been disconnected 2 years ago. Before I tell you what happened after that call, because that wasn't even the strangest part of the night, you need to know something about overnight radio. Nobody's really listening. Ratings-wise, you're talking to almost no one. Which is exactly why what happened made no sense. Someone was listening. Somehow, closer than any listener should be able to get. I'd worked the graveyard slot at the station for 2 years, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., 5 nights a week. Mostly it's autopilot. Playlist, weather, back announce, repeat. You stop expecting anything to happen, which is its own kind of danger, because you stop noticing when something does. That night was quiet, same as always, until line 2 lit up at 12:03. We don't usually get calls that late. The request line dies off after 10 p.m. most nights. So when it rang, I picked it up on air, mid-transition, half expecting dead air or a prank. What I heard instead was my own voice. Not a delay. Not an echo. My exact voice, reading the next 3 songs on tonight's lineup, word for word, except I hadn't said any of it yet. It was reading my playlist back to me before I'd opened my mouth. I hung up. On air. Which you're never supposed to do. I just needed the sound to stop. I checked the caller ID log after the segment ended. The number that came through had a disconnect date on it, 2 years prior. No longer in service. Disconnected. Removed from the network entirely, according to our system. I told myself it was some kind of feedback loop, a technical glitch, anything with a rational explanation attached to it. I believed that right up until 1:47 a.m., when the same voice called back, and this time, it didn't read my playlist. It said my name. Nobody outside the station knows my on-air name is different from my real name. It's not public information, not on our website, not in any bio, nothing searchable. On air, I go by J. My actual name has never been said on that station, not once, in 2 years. The voice on line 2 said my real name. Then it said this. You're not supposed to be here this late anymore. I asked who this was. No answer, just the sound of static, and underneath it, something that took me a second to place. Breathing. Slow. Even. Patient, almost, like whoever it was had nowhere else to be. I muted the call and kept the broadcast running on autopilot while I called our engineer at home. He picked up half asleep, annoyed, and told me the request line hadn't even been physically wired to accept outside calls after midnight in over a year. Budget cut. The line goes dead after 12 automatically, a hard cutoff, not a policy, an actual hardware disconnect. He said there was no way a call should have come through at all. Let alone twice. I want you to sit with that for a second, because here's where it gets worse. I went back through the studio's call log, the actual server-side log, not just caller ID, the one that records every incoming signal whether it connects or not. There were 14 calls logged that night. I had only picked up 2 of them. 12 calls I never heard ring. 12 calls that hit the line, registered in the system, and were logged as answered, despite the fact that I was sitting 3 feet from that phone the entire night and it only physically rang twice. Each of the 12 answered calls had a duration. Some were seconds. One was logged at 11 minutes and 40 seconds, nearly the length of a full song block. 11 minutes and 40 seconds of a call I supposedly took and have zero memory of. I pulled the studio's own on-air recording from that stretch, because everything that airs gets recorded automatically. That's standard practice at every station. If a call had actually gone live on air for 11 minutes, it would be right there in the broadcast audio. There was nothing unusual in the broadcast audio. Music, my voice doing the normal segments, nothing out of place. Which means whatever that 11-minute 40-second call was, it happened on a line that was connected, active, and logged, but never made it to air. And never made a sound in the room with me. I almost didn't check the studio's security camera footage. I want to be honest about that. Some part of me didn't want to know. But I did, eventually, 3 days later, once I could make myself watch it. The footage from that night shows me at the desk the entire time. Alone. Just like I remembered. Except for one frame, security footage runs at a set frame rate, and if you go through it frame by frame instead of playing it back normally, there's a single frame, just one, out of thousands, where the studio chair across from mine, the guest chair we never use during overnight solo shifts, isn't empty. It's gone in the very next frame. Back to empty. No transition, no movement. Nothing that explains it as a camera glitch, according to our IT guy, who checked the raw file for corruption and found none. One frame. Out of an entire 8-hour shift. I never got a clear look at whatever was sitting there. The image was too brief, too dark, to make out anything beyond a shape. I've looked at that single frame more times than I'd like to admit, and I still can't tell you what I saw. I do know the calls stopped after that night. Line 2 hasn't rung once, past midnight, in the 8 months since, verified, hard cutoff, exactly like our engineer said it should have been the whole time. I still work the overnight slot. I still glance at that chair sometimes, mid-broadcast, just to make sure it's still empty. I still take calls on line 2. I just don't answer if the caller ID looks off. If you've heard something on the job you can't explain, we want it. The link to submit your story is in the description. Tomorrow's shift is already scheduled. Subscribe so you're there when it drops.